Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. And we'll start with public comment. You guys will all bear with me today. Yeah, I just, Mr. Mortel, you want to go first?
Howdy. Thanks. Let me find what I was. Appreciate this opportunity to speak. I'm going to repeat a lot what I said last night, but I can do it, I hope, at a slower pace and be able to enunciate a little better. My name is Jack Mortel. I'm retired captain of the Evanston Fire Department. I'm current president of Evanston Firefighters Pension Board. Lifelong Evanston resident. I currently reside in the First Ward. I am here to champion.
Recording in progress.
Okay. All right. I'm here to champion short-term and long-term property tax relief. Last July 24th, the City Council unanimously passed a groundbreaking resolution and 100% pension funding policy for Evanston's public safety pensions by 2040. This policy had been developed over many months of this committee's hard work and passed unanimously by this committee. I think that's remarkable that it passed this committee and the council unanimously. That should be noted. The policy provided short-term tax relief by holding level the tax levy for the public safety pensions year to year, and finally, correctly using the maximum allowable personal property relief tax, replacement tax, PPRT funds received from the state of Illinois. This would bridge from the 90% tax levy to reach 100% or more. I've got that in parentheses on this. 100% or more of the city's actuarial determined contribution, yes. Maximum allowable and 100% or more are direct quotes from the policy. This is what was passed. Despite what was discussed, this is what was passed. The long-term tax relief was astounding. The first year of 100% funding worked into the actuarial accounting this had the effect of over a $26.6 billion reduction of the public safety funds debt. This isn't done by me, this is done by our joint actuary. And the paperwork on that's on the thumb drive. But within 2 months of the passage in October 2023, apparently the city's finance department decided to override the council's unanimous vote and started diverting allowable PPRT to the general fund rather than to the public safety pensions. The amount of the allowable PPRT that was delivered after the passage of the resolution is nearly $1.3 million. I gave you thumb drives last month with this thing. I updated the one sheet to try and make it a little clearer, to kind of show that when they passed the resolution that we'd already collected enough to satisfy the budget. Everything after that was surplus. And I'm here tonight, I was just telling the city manager, I don't like to do this. And at some point, you guys are tired of hearing me. I thought this was finished. We need to put an end to this shell game that's being run by the staff. This drives me nuts. I think one thing, there should be a dedicated account for this PPRT so everyone can track it. I'm probably the only guy in the city that's that actually goes in that account. I gave you how to get on there. I go on there the first part of the month, every month, and then I add it up and like this because I like to keep track of it because the council wisely said that that's going to fix this pension business. So thanks so much for your time. If you have any questions, I have a hard copy here of everything that's on the thumb drive. I'll be happy to show it to anybody.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, committee members. Dave Ellis, 7th Ward. I'd like to speak tonight regarding the reserve fire truck, or not the reserve, the reserve fire truck and the proposed purchase of the new platform truck that the fire department, the chief was presenting. I would like to give you some context and a little bit of history about myself. So what I'd like to do with this, I'd like to first thank all council member Burns and Kelly to putting this back into this committee. That's important. I think a policy or an idea that this committee should put forward, or I'd like to see them put forward, that any non-budget items that show up should not show up at council first. That should go through this committee first. This has happened repeatedly over the last year. It does the citizens a disservice. And then also any budget item that runs over should come back here so you guys can look and see what's actually, accountability, basically, is what's going on. So in any case, where we are today with this truck. What happened was in 2020, end of 2020, the fire department with Fleet Service bought a reserve truck because the truck that we had was no longer serviceable. They paid about $170,000 for this truck. Half of that money was paid for by the Foreign Fire Tax Board, half from the city. It didn't last 3 years, okay? And the reason why it didn't last 3 years, it wasn't inspected properly. And if I can just back up a little bit and give you a little more of my knowledge and expertise in what's going on. I was hired as a fireman in 1979. I was a fire department mechanic in 1979. I also created and passed legislation to create the Foreign Fire Tax Board. That's in 1991. The first thing we purchased from the Foreign Fire Tax Board was a reserve truck. All right, we purchased it from Highland Park with the board purchases, but I did the negotiating. We purchased it with they're representing that truck was in good shape. It was certified and good to go. The city was very skeptical of me because they didn't want a reserve truck at that point. They didn't think they needed it. They were trying to reconfigure the stations just to have 3 fire stations. In any case, we purchased the truck. The city said, we're going to inspect the truck, and if it doesn't pass inspection, we're not going to get it. I go, no, I want you to inspect the truck. It's our safety. It's the residents' safety. They inspected the truck. They took it out to a third party, had this inspected, 10-page report, and it didn't pass. I said, well, Dave, you're going to have to return the truck. So, okay, I'll return the truck. So I returned the truck and talked to the chief, and I said, Chief, we really need a reserve truck. What kind of truck would you like to have as a reserve truck? So we worked that out, and we ended up getting a truck from Pierce that was from Texas. And then it was refurbished and rebuilt by them. The chief liked it, the council liked it, and the Foreign Fire Tax Board liked it, and they bought that truck. And that served as a reserve truck, I think, for 12 or 14 years in Evanston after the purchase. So we're at a point now where the city bought a truck. The frame rusted apart. That didn't happen in 3 years. Torx box broken. That only happens a couple ways: lack of maintenance, operator error, or rust. And the suggestion is to buy a new platform truck, which is a different type of vehicle than the city has. We have 2. It's called tiller trucks, where there's a guy driving in the back end. So if we buy this, and I'm not against the platform truck, don't get me wrong, if we buy this, it's going to be different than what we have. So training is going to be different. Equipment storage is going to be different. It's going to just be a different type of vehicle, which is fine if that's what the city needs. I would suggest first and foremost that for expenditure of this type, $2.3 million, that we get an RFP in place. I've driven a number of manufactured vehicles from a variety, over 34 years, a variety of different types of equipment. An RFP, we should get an RFP for whatever we're getting. I think we need to look at comparable types of trucks, like a tiller truck like we have, so we'd have 3 of the same thing. The 2 trucks that we have in service currently are 2012 and 2015.
You're
Wrap it up?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay.
It's okay.
All right, let me see where I'm at here.
So the 2012 and 2015,
Those are currently have a 20-year service life, so that's when they're going to need replaced. To wrap it up, thanks, Committee Chairman. The bottom line is, it was talked that a reserve truck, we need a reserve truck now, all right? The chief represented $700 a day to get a rental truck in here from Pierce. 365 days, that's $246,000 if it's going to take a year to get this truck here. We can buy a reserve truck that will meet our needs as a reserve truck. We can trade it back in for a lot less than $246,000. We can meet our needs now, as opposed to borrowing a truck from Skokie, which we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 months, which is unsustainable. It's going to save the city a lot of money. We'll have something that we're in charge of, that is certified, been inspected by the manufacturer, service the community, save money, and do what a reserve truck is intended to do until we get to the point where we need to buy a $2.3 million truck. Thank you.
I have a
Thank you.
clarifying question. Is that okay?
Yes.
Why would we buy something that's completely differently operated? Aren't we going to just
Well,
increase
that's
our
that's one of my points. Typically, as a mechanic and as a guy, and I'll just throw this in real quick. So I know some guys in Chicago, okay? So they have 50 trucks and 20 platforms, aerial platforms. And I said, how's that working in Chicago? I said, well, there's only 10 platform trucks that work every day because the maintenance on those is so much higher. So they're down a lot
Okay.
more.
We'll discuss it at the fire truck.
I'm happy
Yeah.
to answer any questions.
Okay, if you
down
can
the road.
stay, we may
Chair-
have questions
Chair,
later.
I don't know if you can hear me. This is Councilman Burns. I was going to ask if you could consider allowing the gentleman to come back once we're discussing this issue, because I think
Yes,
we all would have.
if you
would
don't
have
mind
questions
staying,
for
we're
him.
going
Thank
to
you.
discuss it later if you can come back. Okay. Any other public comment? Yes?
That makes no sense. That text
Hi, Mary Rosinski, thank you. I just want to say, first of all, I love your committee. I think you guys are sort of the watchdogs of the way things are supposed to be operating, but are not. But as the Budget and Finance Committee, I am hoping that for next year, we establish a budget and staff is bound to follow it. And as we move forward, what I've noticed this year is, and previous years, unfortunately, is that we have decision and multi-million-dollar spending by crisis. It gets put on as a special order of business, and then council is burdened with this, having to make this important decision, and pointing cases like yesterday, the migrant shelter, which is a very important issue, was put on as a special order of business, and then staff suggested 2 buildings, but that issue really surrounded going with a grant to explore possibilities. And possibilities could have been to work with other communities, work with landlords, just come up with a lot of things without sort of going down the road of the city buying 1020 Church or using the Civic Center. So I'm just asking you as the Budget Committee to maybe put out forward to the manager and the city staff that decisions that require financial, more than a couple $1,000s or $20,000, you guys have time, like it gets brought up and it doesn't get put on a special order of business. It's discussion, and then you talk with yourselves, you look at it, you get feedback, and then you put it on for the next year's budget. But we are so far out of budget from what we had passed in 2023 for 2024 already in terms of what expenditures keep coming up. It's just astronomical. So I'm just asking you guys to kind of work with staff to follow the budget.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Anyone online? Okay, I'm the next order of business, so. Oh, can we take roll?
Yeah, now that we have a quorum. Thank you. We'll start online with taking roll. Councilmember Nusma?
Here.
Councilmember Reed?
Here.
Councilmember Burns?
Here.
Councilmember Kelly?
Here.
Committee Member McMillan?
Here.
Councilmember Wynn? Committee Member Livingston?
Here.
And Chair Reiches?
Here.
Here. All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you. So just the way that I work, I kind of set some goals, and I know I've talked to some people about it, but I wanted to start at the beginning, just to remind us what our role is here. And our role is really the finance budget, and you can all read it, but really to look at the budgets, the reporting, the management, investments, the bonds. There's a lot of things that the city council will decide, but I think a lot of things come back to us on how we're funding it, how we're going to get it done. So just to be clear of what our responsibilities are. I'm piggybacking off of some of David Livingston's goals, ex-Chair Livingston. And so really some of the goals for the next 2 years, the end of this year, next year, is identify additional revenue sources, and a lot of that will be grants. Really looking at the expenses, like you mentioned. Capital improvement plans, long-term debt plan, review the status of pensions, and I think we've gone a long way with that, and we're going to continue to update that. And then really the benchmark data, and you guys have been great. I think we've identified the communities that we're going to do. So what I want to do is take each one And I think what really was a benefit with the pension, which I think was one of our really great things we did last year, is we worked, like David and I and Claire and I, we worked in groups of 2 with the Open Meetings Act. We couldn't work in 3, but really to come up, and I think a big part of our job is policies. If we can set some policies in place that will live beyond us, that's really important. So I'm going to meet with each one of you in May and June and see what you'd like to work on. But one of them, you know, with the revenue sources, are there other grants? And I've been talking with Clayton, and there's a lot of grants we are taking advantage of that I wasn't even aware of. And if there's other non-traditional revenue sources, we're kind of tied with the revenue sources that we have now. So. Expenses, really understanding our major expenses and really having a policy for non-budgeted expenses, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Understanding any expenses from the previous year that are larger than 10% or 10,000, the greater of over the previous year, and then any reduction of expenses that we can do. So we'll work on that. Capital improvement plan, we really want to identify there's a lot of deferred maintenance. So we really want to identify what are our priorities. If I quote my dad, we can have anything we want, we can't have everything. So what's most important? And we have to figure what's most important for the city of Evanston. Tonight, I hope we're going to come up with a dollar amount and work with the city to come up with non-budgeted capital projects. We know there's emergencies, those are going to go, but there's things that just come up like fire trucks, like little beans that would be great if our committee could see. And I know there's some confidentiality with some of it. We got to prioritize our major projects. We've got a lot of major projects. So I know you lose sleep over it. I talk to you, but we really want to prioritize that. And then the deferred maintenance, you know, we don't want to wake up and realize that there's things that should have been done years ago. So the long-term debt plan, you know, we just really want to come up with kind of a 5-year and 10-year. We want to know what's rolling off, what are we going to need to roll on, and develop, you know, this long-term plan so that we're not always debating about it and we know what's coming ahead. And I know these are ambitious, but if we get some of them done, it'll be great. I don't know, I'm happy. And this is, I think we're pretty well set. I'm actually on the fire pension board, but we're going to do more updates. We're going to have the presidents of the police and fire come and just give their updates. From the fire's point of view, we just had a great audit, so we're very excited about that. We're going to get all the pensions have been consolidated. We're going to show you performance and actuarial reports, and we're going to be changing some of the timing on this because it was a little early and we do get data a little later than expected. But I put myself on that committee, but someone can work with me on that. And then the benchmarks, I think we've fine-tune the benchmark communities, but we really want to determine what items should be benchmarked, look at the key performance indicators by other communities, and really look at Evanston versus these benchmarks. So we're not making decisions in a vacuum. We have data to really make these final decisions. So hopefully some of you will want to work on this. I talked to Hitesh and Clayton, and they said this would be fine, but we just want to quickly, every quarter, we want to see, you know, actual revenue versus budget, reconciling of the excess reserve balance, because a lot of times we hear, well, we could just take it from the excess reserves. We want to make sure we know what that balance is. We do have a deficit next year, so we want to make sure. Make sure we have cash and liquidity. ARPA update, that's really important. I guess if you don't use it, you lose it, so we want to get that. And then I kind of have the dates, so our next one, you know, we'll get the 6:30 data, hopefully in August. They'll come to us with that, and then this is kind of the chart. So this will be on our regular schedule, so we'll get that information. And then this is really for me, and I know a lot of the aldermen probably, you guys have so many meetings and so much education, but I kind of thought of the things that I would like to be educated more on, and I'll flush it out with you guys because we're waiting till June, but we thought maybe we could have a meeting at 4 to 5, whoever wanted to come, and pick each of these categories, and I just, expenses, capital improvement, revenue sources, debt, pensions, and other, and just, we can record it, we can invite the community, we can have it, and staff said that they, you know, would be happy to do it. So I know you guys all have a lot of meetings, but this is really for me and maybe some of the other committee members as well. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity. So we have a lot on our plate, but we will work one by one, and it'll be the help of each of you to get through it. So thank you.
I have my hand raised, Chair, when you return to your chair.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Reiches, for stepping up to the role. Thank you to our previous chair for the work that has gotten us here thus far. Really appreciate the presentation that you just gave and the walkthrough. But there's one issue that I have. Everything was great, and so that's why this one thing sticks out to me as someone who's really been concerned about revenue. I think that my screen's a little wonky now, so if I missed something on your slides, apologies. But I only heard you mention grants when you referred to revenue, and I think that looking at revenue as only grants is one, just a missed opportunity, but two, in my experience, and certainly if staff or anyone else has another opinion, please share it, but that with a lot of grants, because they're typically so hyper-focused, it oftentimes actually means that we have to spend more money than we may have planned to on something that is not a priority, right? There are grants for, road improvements or for traffic calming, and it's certainly something we care about here, but would we have spent the money to improve a certain corridor at that time? Would it have been a priority without the grant money? And does this mean that we're taking money away from something else that is a greater priority? So I just want us to keep that in mind when we're thinking about grants, and really also just looking at revenue that the city can produce.
Thank you. And I may have missed one bullet point, but I also had evaluate non-traditional sources of revenue, like the parking, like those other things that we've brought up in the past. But it sounds like you might want to be on this committee, so we will talk.
I certainly am interested. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. We will definitely follow up with that. But I did forget one thing. We'd like to approve the minutes.
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we'll move in a sec. We will start online with the vote. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Aye. Committee Member McMillan.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn. Aye. Committee Member Livingston.
Aye.
Chair Reiches.
Aye.
Passed.
So now I'd like to open the discussion regarding the property tax loss factor. Clayton?
Thank you, Chair Reiches, Clayton Black, Budget Manager. So we talked about this 2 months ago, and we've come back with a more robust set of data to help make this decision on what our property tax loss factor should be. Let me open it here. So the Cook County allows communities to use a loss factor of up to 5% for debt service and 3% for all other levies. We've used that maximum amount for the last several years. As it shows in the data, you can see that combined, looking at all levies, our total loss factor has varied between 1.5% and 2.8% over the last 6 years. The highest loss factor we had was 2.8%. So staff's recommendation is to begin using a 3% across the board for all levies. In talking, we're comfortable maybe going down to 2.5%, but given some of the potential shortfalls, we've had a couple 2.2, 2.8, 2.0 last year. If you go down too far, you do have to make up those amounts. So in debt service, if we bring in less than our levy, we have to tap into reserves to cover that. If in the pension funds, if we bring in less than the net levy, we have to dig into reserves to do that. And you can see, for instance, if we used a 2.5% in the general fund, in one of those years, we would have been making a contribution to the pension funds out of reserves, and one of those other years, it would have been very, very close. But given the average and given where we stand and given the more recent history, the last 3 years, We've been between 1.4 and 2%. I think we'd be comfortable with 2.5% across the board with a 3% loss factor in debt service. We have to pay those bills, and we wouldn't want to bring in less than what we levy. So I'm happy to entertain any other questions on that topic.
Committee Member Kelly.
Thank you, and I appreciate reducing that. As I look to all the other surrounding suburbs, I think we're maybe the only one that maxes out at the 3 and the 5. Can you explain to me, or to us, how does it work that, like, we come in sometimes at a higher percent for certain levies, but a lower percent for others? I mean, I know it's 5% on the debt levy. On the debt levy, we can have an allowable loss of up to 5 and up to 3 on the other ones, but why are some of those levies met better than others?
In a long story short, it's not clear. We've reached out to Cook County, and they haven't given us a good answer. So I know what you're talking about. If you look in 2017, our loss in debt service was 1.6%, but our loss in the general fund was 2.5%, so that's a full 1% difference. We've reached out. We haven't gotten a good answer as to why that is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see it reduced to 2.5, 3 on debt service. I think we're going to be safe. I would have preferred, but I'm happy to support this, that we look at the average over the last 2 years, and then based on that, so that we're sort of using scientific data from 2 years, and then whatever that average is, but I'm fine with going with this, so we're, not calculating every year.
Yeah, and we had some long conversations, Depeche, you and I, and the 2.5 seem comfortable with the 3 for the debt service, and we'll watch it and we'll see what happens next year. I felt a little more comfortable going with a longer average because with inflation, we have no idea. Is this something we should have a motion, or we just advise you?
So it's up to the committee. We don't necessarily need a motion. It's an administrative task. We've heard your feedback, and it sounds like you're good with the 3 and the 2.5%.
Yeah, I'd like to go to motion, though.
That into the budget, but it's certainly up to you. And we can make a motion on it if that's the preference.
Okay, if we want a motion, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we change the allowable loss factor to a 2.5 for all levies and 3.0 for the debt service levy.
Second.
And to make that clear, we would begin this with next year's budget cycle.
Okay.
We can't change this year's levy,
Okay.
obviously.
Do you want to take a roll call?
Second, but I do have discussion on this. I have my hand raised.
Oh, sorry, the presentation's up, I didn't see.
No worries.
Oh, and Jonathan, you have a question too, sorry, we didn't see it.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, thank you. So one, this ultimately, I just want to make this note for staff. I suppose if we're making a motion on this, that will come to council now for final approval. Is that a correct understanding?
I don't know that it necessarily needs to. Again, it's an administrative task. It's something that we don't need council action to do. So I don't think it's necessary to go to council.
So then in that case, I would say I don't know if a motion is necessary. If it's not going forward to council for approval, then I don't know if a motion is necessary. I think if we're making this a policy and there would be a resolution drafted that says, hey, going forward from 2025 budget onward, that we would, set the loss rate to, the 2.5 and the 3%, then I think a motion is appropriate and a resolution that would be sent to council committing the body to such is appropriate. I'll also ask, what is and I again, my screen is a bit wonky, so I couldn't see everything on the chart that was put on the screen, but what is the dollar amount and what are the savings that we would realize by moving from 3 to 2.5 and capping the other loss factor at 3%?
Yeah, I mean, it reduces it by about 400,000, which would equate to about $5 on the average property tax bill. It's a fairly small amount going from 3 to 2.5%. In terms of savings, it's a fairly small amount.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I won't discredit $400,000. That's not insignificant. So, okay, so that I appreciate that information, and that is it for now. Again, if the goal is to have this go to council as a resolution, I support it, and I will vote yes And I think anyone who sees that as the appropriate next step, vote yes to this. And if you don't think that this should be a formal resolution and a policy of the city for 2025 and beyond, I suggest you vote no. I think I'll be voting yes. Thank you.
Councilman Newsman, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Reed answered my question about the actual dollar amount, and I'll just weigh in on procedure. Let's just go ahead and vote on it. There's an appetite to weigh in at this committee. I don't think it needs to go to council.
Kelly, did you have another comment?
No, I just think we want to make sure, I mean, I think, that we have been levying at 3 and 5 at the maximum for so many years without any council participation. I think that in itself, I think to do something like that, ideally would have been something that, because this is money that we're, taking from taxpayers on top of what we say we're going to take at the Truth in Hearing, Truth in Taxation hearing. So that money isn't included. So I think we really, as a council, I really do think this needs to go to council, because this is additional funds that we are agreeing to take on top of what we're saying that we're going to levy at the Truth in Taxation hearing. So I do feel it's important. I feel it's important that we take a vote here to firm it up, and then I think it's important that it go to council just to ensure, going forward that this is on the record and that council has stated its preference to reduce this.
Do you have something?
Point of, sorry, just point of order. I do think that, because Councilmember Newsman mentioned that he does not believe it should go forward to council. My understanding of this committee is this committee reports directly to council and does not have authority, to my knowledge, and again, staff or the chair can correct me if they have information otherwise. This committee does not take final action. That council is the body that takes final action. And so if we are saying that this is the policy, I think, and we're voting on it as a committee, I think it necessarily has to go forward to council.
I would note too, it's an administrative function that we've historically been able to handle administratively, and there is a majority of city council on this committee. So the fact that we've heard the concern about this and then the desire to reduce, we're happy to reduce. That said, happy to go to city council with it as well. Given the conversation here, I can't imagine the full city council would feel differently given the makeup of both groups.
And just to reiterate my point here, you vote yes if you think this should go to council and be the official policy of the city. You vote no if you agree with Clayton that it's just administrative and it doesn't need to go to
Councilman
council.
Kelly?
No, I think it's important we just take a vote here, so it doesn't have to go to council, but so that we're giving direction as a vote, so we have the numbers for staff on record. It doesn't mean that we're saying this has to go to council. I'm perfectly fine. I'm amenable to us taking a vote so that the will of this body is expressed in terms of giving direction to staff.
And Councilman Burns?
That was it. Councilmember Kelly answered my question. I just wanted to make sure, Councilmember Kelly, that whatever you intend to happen is reflected in the motion you made. So I think if you wanted this to go to council, you should, especially with all the confusion around it now, I would have wanted you to just restate the motion, including that you wanted, you want to vote at council. But it sounds like you don't require that, and so I'm happy to just vote on this and did not go to council. So,
Well, then just point of order. I'm really seeking where this body has the authority to direct staff in and of itself. I don't understand.
Well,
where
I
this
think
committee
it's
would get
because
that
this is an
authority.
advisory, what you were saying, so if we're giving a motion to advise you, but whatever, why don't you revise your motion, Councilman Kelly?
I'd like to revise my motion to ask that staff, going forward, reduce the allowable loss factor to 3% for all the levies except for the debt levy, which would be at, to 2.5% for all the levies except for the debt levy at 3%. And we'd like to make this a recommendation from this committee to our staff.
Second.
Okay, do you want to take a vote?
Okay, we will start again online. Councilmember Newsma,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns, Councilmember Kelly,
Aye.
Committee Member McMillan,
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn, Aye. Committee Member Livingston,
Aye.
Chair Reiches.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to open the discussion now regarding the financing options for the fire truck. It was my understanding that our job is to figure out how we're going to finance it, but does this committee also want to discuss about what type of truck and if we want to buy the truck, or is that the council's job? Yeah, I mean, my understanding that's the council's job. Our job is that how we're going to pay for it. So I'd like to open it up to Clayton.
I can speak to the payment solution, and then we do have the chief here, as well as our facilities and fleet manager who can speak to the operational needs if there's questions. In terms of the financing recommendation, as discussed with the department, we felt that if the prepayment discounts are not greater than the amount of interest that we would earn on the cash, our preference would be to not prepay and take advantage of that discount and instead pay later, earn interest on our reserves or whatever cash we were to plan to pay for this with. At the same time, we could include the truck in the 2025 bond reimbursement resolution. This is something that Laura brings forward every January, February for the projects that we plan on paying with bonds. So we have the option of paying for it with future bond issuances. And then finally, deferring the payment does allow us to plan for it as part of the 2025 budget. So we're not making a decision right now. It gives us time to incorporate it into the budget, and they can start the build process on the truck. But that's Finance's recommendation on the payment solution. So,
Councilman Kelly?
Thank you, and thank you, Clayton, for that. I guess I'd like to hear a little bit from Chief Polyp regarding some of the comments made. And so is this new platform truck would be a reserve truck?
No.
No, okay.
The new platform would be a frontline truck.
A frontline truck.
Yes.
And I don't know if you can respond to some of what we heard about whether this is.
So I did walk in as Dave was in the middle of his
Okay.
speech, so I heard some of it. The first thing, this truck was inspected. We sent the right people out there. It was the vendor's responsibility to make sure it was DOT and NFPA compliant. We sent our members and we sent mechanics from our fleet to go out and inspect the truck. As I stated in my last presentation on the 8th, I believe that was, we did not know about any of the rust rail or the frame rails rusting until we sent the vehicle up to Wisconsin to be repaired, the torque box, and the torque box is what holds the ladder. So when they took the whole vehicle apart is when they noticed a lot of damage on the frame rails from what they called, the frame rails rusted from the inside out. So it's something that you're not going to see until you take a vehicle completely apart.
So it's possible that
Just
that.
point of order. Just point of order. I just want to remind us that this is the Finance and Budget Committee, as the chair stated, and there's a time and place for us to have a discussion interrogating the, some of the details here. And I think it's appropriate. But I think we should focus on the finance aspect of this rather than.
May I finish?
Thank you.
So I do think we're talking about 2.3 million. I trust that this is the right decision, but I think since we heard information and since the difference could be over $1 million, that we should have some knowledge of why this is, why we're moving in this direction, because we are the Finance and Budget Committee. So I guess that was just the question in terms of the rusting we might not have known about. I guess we want to ensure going forward that when we buy used trucks, but.
Of course, and I agree, right? Like this was a unseen catastrophe. Let's call it that. We didn't know it until they were able to pull the entire truck apart. In the past, the last reserve truck we had lasted, I believe, 19 years, and that was a win. This one here, we purchased to update our reserve truck, and it was a swing and a miss, and that's not good. It's not what you want to hear. I understand that, but we did do all the things, and we worked with the vendor. We had our mechanics go out there. It's just we couldn't see it until the vehicle was taken apart, and they were able to find these flaws.
Councilman McMillan?
Can you clarify the ages of the other trucks, and what about the Can you clarify the ages of the other trucks, and what about the new one that we were quote-unquote given by Northwestern, the purple one?
That's a fire engine. A fire engine pumps water. These are
Got it.
trucks. Trucks
Got it.
have ladders.
Okay.
So what we have in
Open
town
ladder.
right now are two tiller trucks, which are, it's what we call a straight stick. It doesn't matter who drives the front or the back. It's what we operate off of.
Okay.
And the two trucks that we have now are straight sticks. So that means we climb up to the tip, we set up the ladder, we climb up to the tip, and we manually use the hose stream if we need it, or we manually climb into the room if we need to. What we're proposing here is a platform truck that we can work off of a platform. It's safer for operations, it's better for rescues, it's better to have multiple firefighters up there with you instead of just one. And when the mention of not going out for RFP, it's because there's only one manufacturer that can meet our needs. We have viaducts in town, we have very tight streets. We need this truck to be less than 44 feet, and we need it to be under 11 foot 1 inch so we can make the viaducts. Is it a different type of training? It is. Is it anything we can't accomplish? No. It's a safer vehicle. It's what we need. It's what we've needed in this town, and it gives our fleet more versatility to operate as an ISO 1 fire department.
Okay, Councilman Newsman, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. What's the service life of the new vehicle once we have it?
20 years.
Thank you. And then procedurally here, not to rehash the discussion we had on the previous item, but is this committee being asked to vote on a proposed funding mechanism? If so, I'll make the motion to at least make the recommendation to staff that we accept their proposal.
Second.
Okay, and I think Member Livingston had a,
I did have a question maybe before we vote on it. I'm sorry, how long ago did we buy this truck that has the rust problem, the used truck?
I think we purchased it in 2021.
2021.
Is that right?
Right.
2021.
Okay, and there, it was a used truck at that
Yes.
time. Is there,
It's a 2006 Pierce truck.
yeah, but we think clearly had we known to look, or had we had access to this, to where the defects were, we would not have bought the truck at that time. Is there no recourse do we feel, through the dealer or however we got it, is there no recourse?
That's a great question. So
Yeah.
we have looked at all the paperwork from the dealer and the warranties and everything that we did to purchase the truck. We bought this as a used vehicle, just like you would go to a car lot and buy a used car. But like I stated, the dealer is responsible to make sure it is DOT and NFPA meets all those standards, and it did. We did check it out with our mechanics. They looked for all the things that they could possibly see on, from their vantage point, and it looked good. And it was a truck that we needed.
And the amount that we spent at that time for the used truck was how
I
much?
believe it was $180,000. Our foreign fire tax paid for it up front and then paid half of it, and then the city paid the other half.
Okay, so relative to the cost of a new truck, it sounds like it was sort of a bit of a stopgap. We knew it was an inexpensive option at the time. It just unfortunately ended up in worse shape than we
Yeah,
thought.
our department is in a unique situation where we need to operate 2 trucks in town. It is crucial to our operations. It's crucial to the community. So we needed to have a reserve vehicle, a reserve truck. So yes, it was very important that we found something to replace the one that was on its last leg as it was. And unfortunately, this is where we're at.
okay, I think we have a motion for, Councilman
I just want to understand why the RFP. So you're saying this is the only company that can provide this truck that can fit under our
Right now, this is
except we can't issue an RFP.
So for a tower truck, I'm not saying if we went a different direction, which is a completely different operation, yeah, you could do an RFP for a tiller truck, which is what we have now. We are trying to get our fleet and our operations to be versatile and to have a straight stick and a tower. That makes us a very versatile department. And for this type of vehicle, Pierce is the only manufacturer that can meet our needs with the height, length, and the way it turns. It has all-wheel turning, so once I hit 20 degrees, the other wheels, the back wheels turn, and I can make all the tight turns in Evanston to get the truck wherever I need it.
Okay, thank you. And what's the difference in price between the tiller and the platform?
About $250,000. If we were to get a brand-new tiller, we're talking $2 million, 2.1.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that, oh, and then in terms of the DOT compliance, so you say the vendor was responsible, do they provide the paperwork for the compliance on that? Like when we go, do
I'd
they,
have
or
to
do we
call-
just, I'm just wondering how that, just want to,
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. Sean Cholik, Manager of Facilities and Fleet Management. So yes, when we purchase this vehicle, they basically write within the proposal that it's covered, that they've checked it for compliance. And, you know, they provided a number of different sources of paperwork. I'd have to go back and look through to see exactly what was in that packet. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it should all be covered there.
thank you. I guess I was just asking, so we don't just have them say, yes, it's DOT compliant. There's a certificate or something that I would assume that they present
Correct.
to the city.
Yeah.
And they gave us that at the time.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Reed, did you have your hand up? It was up and down.
I'm in a reserve comment. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion then? Yeah, do you want to repeat the motion, Councilman Newsman?
Sure. I move that we accept staff's recommendation on the funding strategy for this fire truck.
We have a second?
All right, we'll start online again. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed. Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Committee Member McMillan.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn. Aye. Committee Member Livingston.
Aye.
Chair Reiches.
Aye. And now that we had the motion, I just have another question that was brought up. We're going to be renting per day, was it $700 a day to rent a truck? I just want to be clear on that.
No, at this time, that is not the case. We are working with Skokie and Niles to use their trucks when we're down a truck. And the truck that they have to rent, we have on very last reserve if we were to need it. And they would rent that to us for $200 a day. So Pierce is trying to help us out by that, if we needed it, and then getting us in line instead of a 4-year wait time to get a truck here in 12 to 14 months.
Okay, I just wanted to finalize that because it sounded
As
like a
long
lot
as
of
we have
money.
a relationship with Skokie and Niles, we're going to be in
Okay.
good shape.
Just bring them donuts. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'd like to open the discussion for the ARPA funding. And we are going to bring, Clayton, we're going to bring this up again in, I think, September, October, because there's still a few things that haven't been finalized, but do you want to present to us? Or, I'm sorry, is it Laura, or who's?
We have Sarah Flax,
Sarah.
Community Development Director. I don't know
Okay.
if she was planning a presentation, but I'll let her come to the mic.
If you just want to give us a summary of, there's a lot that's already been committed, but there's a few things that are still pending, right?
Yes, that's true. We recently committed $900,000, which reduced the uncommitted amount substantially. So technically, there is $159,272.63 that are uncommitted. When you look at the chart of the actual number, the commitments, it kind of understates the number of projects because,
Page 30 and 31.
yeah, sorry, I don't really want to bother with that. Because certain things like Evanston Thrives is actually about 25 different projects, and also participatory budgeting is 7. So there are someplace in the neighborhood of 64 different projects or activities that are funded. That does not include the administrative expenses. We summarized the actual ones that are completed or that we feel are going to be completed by December of this year, so we don't have any worry about them being, any of that revenue being, or money being clawed back. And that is just shy of 25 million. Between participatory budgeting and Evanston Thrives, we have a significant amount to be allocated still, but those projects are well underway. We have certain funds that are obligated, but they are not committed at the requirements of Treasury. Now, U.S. Treasury, this is what happens when you get this kind of grant that is a new grant that nobody's done before. They write the regulations as they go along. So one of the things that they want to make sure of is that projects are actually going to be expended and be expended for real activities that are by the end of 2026. So they have specified that certain types of agreements are not what they consider a commitment. For example, we have grant agreements for our big capital projects with our nonprofits. They have to get those dollars under contract to be fully committed according to Treasury's definition. And Treasury is actually holding a webinar on the 8th of May to give us greater detail on this, so we will obviously be paying attention to that. We have one project that is on hold because of a legal issue, and that is our 33-unit affordable housing project. Hopefully we will get a resolution on that this month, and hopefully it will be something that we move forward. We are in regular discussion with Family Focus and the McGaw-Y and Northlight Theater. All of them are actually, well, some have already, only Family Focus has billed us anything so far, but both the Y and Northlight have eligible expenses. They were kind of hanging on because they were thinking we'll use it all for construction. We can use these funds for soft costs, of which they have significant soft costs, all of them, so we are encouraging them to give us those costs as we go along. And they all know the deadlines and are working for the contract. We do have a couple things that we are going to recommend for reallocation. There was just over $400,000 that's left from the participatory budgeting funding that was for implementing participatory budgeting. It kind of overstates the amount that's really left because the staffing for the participatory budgeting actually has been billed in the admin. The reason we've done that, we could have put the money into the admin budget to show that, which we haven't done yet, but we're recommending that it be put there to cover remaining costs, is that Treasury doesn't want us to break the administrative costs for different projects out separately. It would create quite a nightmare because they'd then be trying to evaluate a whole lot of administrative costs for different projects. And so we are following their direction and putting it all in one budget or in one, what they call a project. The lead service replacement line on private property is a project that has been moving much more slowly than was originally expected. This is when we replace a water line, and there may be other situations, a water main, and we have the service lines that then have to be replaced at the same time. Our people, our contractors or staff replace the public side, but the private side is done through contracts with individual plumbing companies. And that is not something you can really get under contract because you do them as they come up. Because the estimate is that we're not going to fully use that funding, and there are other sources of funding that are on the horizon for that. Approximately $1.5 million is going to be, and this recommendation will come to City Council, is going to be moved to a water main replacement project, which is again eligible, same category, but it just makes more appropriate use of the funding based on the timing that we're going to have to spend it. So the other thing that we've looked at is a contingency plan. What if somebody's project falls through? We have a couple capital projects that I've worked with Laura and her team on. The water main replacement is one of those. The budget is about $5 million. What we're talking about already moving to that is about $1.5 million. So that gives us about $3.5 million space to put something under if something falls through, because that is under contract and it is ARPA funded. Same thing with the Independent Park project. That already has a commitment of $500,000 for the dining plaza or portion of that, but that could also be used as a place to put additional funds if we need to have them under contract by the end of this year. The one thing we have to watch for is how much is under replacement revenue and other categories, which we're keeping an eyeball on too. So I don't expect we're going to have any trouble with our funding, keeping our funding, but it becomes a bit of a game to keep track of where to put it and how to manage that.
Well, we're glad that you're on top of it, and thank you, because it's that's City of Evanston could use this money. But we had a few questions for you.
Sure.
Councilman Newsman, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of questions. First, with the participatory budgeting, if you could go back to that slide, Director Flax. Like I said, so how, it was a little bit unclear to me, but we actually have that $406,000 that we had planned to spend but did not spend?
Well, we had $406,000 left in that bucket, if you will. The amount of staffing that was covered by the administrative budget is $205,915.97. So that is why we're recommending that we put the remaining funding into the administrative expenses into ARPA admin. So far, including that just over $200,000, we've spent almost $437,000. But keep in mind that a whole lot of these projects and activities are actually still to be managed, and we don't know. In some cases, we are not going to have staff that are going to be able to ride herd on all of these things, and we may have to do some contract hiring for certain types of expertise. Handling the three big capital projects, making sure that requires not only site visits to see that they're doing what they are saying they're doing. When we have large draws on capital projects, normally we're working with somebody who has we have different checks and balances, but it's not something that we want to pay out without having somebody actually going and checking on what's being done, making sure that the pay applications are accurate. That's some of the types of things.
Not right now, and maybe not next month, but on an ongoing basis, I would like to see a report on our participatory budgeting, the entire initiative, to which we devoted, or we initially allocated $3.5 million. When all is said and done, I'd like to see how much we actually spent and how that money was spent. But to your point, a lot of that's still ongoing. So it's too early to request or too early to demand that those numbers be provided. Next question was on the lead service line. Is there? I understand that it's administratively difficult to use the ARPA money for the private side of the lateral. Could we not just use ARPA money for the city's the city side of the service line?
I'm going to let Laura answer that.
Hello, my name's Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. So the answer is yes. In the different categories for how ARPA money could be spent, some are capped at a percentage of your allocation, but water and sewer funding, basically you can use your entire allocation for that. So as long as we're doing a water improvement project, we're totally able to use it for either the private or the public side. Our city code designates the private side of lead service lines as sort of, there's a public benefit to replacing them, which allows us to use ARPA funds for the private side as well, and that's where we've chosen to focus a lot of our ARPA funds. But in this 2024 project, we'll be just pushing that money in there, although we'll also cover lead service line replacement.
Thank you. Councilman Kelly? Oh, are you done, Councilman Newsman?
Well, so then my final question was just procedurally, is staff seeking direction from this committee, or is this just a report for our information?
This is a report.
It's a report.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just want to keep tabs on this to make sure that everything's been allocated and that we get the full money.
I do want to point out one thing, though. When we are reallocating stuff, if we can reallocate a whole bunch of money to one big project, it reduces all the compliance and all the headaches of making sure we have all the paperwork in place and all that fun stuff, which can be quite onerous.
Thank you. Councilman Kelly?
Thank you. So, okay, so I see here we allocated $500,000 for the participatory budgeting, planning, as well as $100,000 for the process. So $600,000, which I understand we've spent a couple hundred of that, and we're moving that to the grant management, compliance, and reporting line. So that was $900,000 plus that $600. That's $1.5 million for compliance. That's a big number for a city our size. So I just wonder, and I understand we've contracted with somebody, Ms. Erica Tajida.
We have an employee who has a contract as opposed to being hired as a full-time staff person. It's a limited time position. So that's why it's being done on a contractual basis, just as the participatory budgeting staff were hired on a contractual basis. The hiring process was exactly the same. We had a job description, we went through the whole hiring process that we normally do.
So Ms. Tejeda was hired last year?
She started.
Or she was we contracted with her
Yes.
last year? For
She
3
started,
years?
Well, she'll be, she was for the remainder of 2023, half of 2023, 24, 25, 26, and the first quarter of 27 because of the last report.
And so she is our main sort of compliance person?
She is the main person doing the compliance and collecting everything, making sure people are following all the rules, and doing all the reporting.
Okay, and she's on an independent contract, correct, with the city?
Yeah, we just have a contractual agreement for
With her? She's not, is she with a firm?
No.
Or she's just
No.
independent? Okay.
No, it's as if we hired her, which we did, but we chose to pay her as a contractor rather than getting her into benefits and all of that stuff.
Okay, so what would you estimate that cost to be for her, for that position, for that contract?
Well, we've spent, so far it's about $56,000, and that was from June of 2023 through the end of February. I'm not good at doing math in my head.
Maybe 300,000. It's through the end of 26? Into
First quarter of 2027.
First quarter of 27. So probably 300,000. And then the
Yeah,
others, so
neighborhood.
are somewhere in there, about 300,000. And so we've spent about, between participatory budgeting and the other one looks like well over $500,000. So the other expenditures, what else have we spent on compliance?
Over $500,000, no, that $436,000 I told you included her salary so far.
So it's over
included-
400,000 in the compliance. This was back in November, it was 412,000 plus participatory budgeting at that point was actually close to 200,000. So that comes to over 600,000, about 650,000 total on expenditures and for compliance. So, but just as of November last year, just in that one excluding what was expended in participatory budgeting, it was over 400,000 as of November last year. So that's when I received this printout from you of what had been spent.
That
to date.
included the participatory budgeting, I'm sorry.
also
That
listed again
included the
then.
staff for participatory budgeting.
But it's listed, it's added in here separately on separate line items. It says that just, so then it's been miscounted because it's listed here as 93,655 on planning for the participatory budgeting.
Yes.
Then another line it's listed that we spent 100,000 and then another line 412,000, all under grant, under compliance and management. So-
Okay. So the
And I
two-
think you did mention that salaries were
We
covered.
we have a
also.
lot of questions, so can you come back and reconcile that?
Yeah,
Or-
there's,
I mean, it is a lot that we're spending.
Yeah, I know,
for our
I know,
staff.
but I've
I
got a
would
bunch
like
of
to
people
point
that.
something out.
Okay.
Do you know what the percent of a grant for CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, that you get for administration? It's a complex grant that has many, many activities. 20%. What percent is this of $43 million?
That, I have a question. So I did my own sort of benchmarking and reached out to other communities, Skokie, Wilmette, Morton Grove, Gwinnett. None of them spent anything on administration. They did it all internally. And so if we add that up, we're talking about 3.4% that we're spending on just administration. I know some of these are complex. So I looked at what Chicago is doing, and I think that they're at about 33 basis points is what they're paying in administration. So, it just seems to me we're way out of whack. We're paying an enormous amount for administration.
Well, there's a great deal of difference in what people do. We do-
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
We do not charge Laura's time when she's working on a project to this budget.
Okay.
We don't know what other people did. You technically can charge those people's time if they're working on it, if it is called
And sort of quote unquote
program
pay
delivery.
yourself back. I
No,
understand
if it's
that.
program
So-
delivery.
Right.
But the other thing, I looked at some of these communities too. They're really not comparable at all. A number of them probably just took all the money and put it under.
No.
Just a minute.
I
Under
went through and looked at
replacement revenue.
it wasn't just a single line item.
No, I
at
didn't
all.
say that.
What, I think today we're just getting the reports, so I think I'd like to get the questions that we have and give them time.
My question is, why
to
are
come
we at
back.
3.4% when other communities are either zero or even a very complex city like Chicago is way, way, way below us as well? That's my question.
Okay, so if you want to funnel a few questions to me, I can get them to staff, and then we can, because I think today's purpose was just to make sure that we had as much allocated as possible, but I know you, committee.
I do. I just a couple of questions. Sarah, thank you for your work on this, and I know it's a very complex program. I want to focus on this area of obligation plans underway and allocated funds, because that's our at-risk money, correct? And I add that up, and it's about $9 million, is that in total? It's these items here? And also, you said that the rules for spending this money come from Treasury.
Yep.
If there's a change in administration at the end of the year, could the rules change again? Or are we comfortable that we understand what the rules are and
They'd have a hard time making very large changes. Because they have written and approved all of these things. They're these, 400-page documents
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
rules, so.
Okay, so I would say, this $9 million or so, to me, looks very, concerning, given its status. Has the city done everything? Have we gotten all the money we could off revenue replacement?
No.
How much money more could we do on, because
I would
revenue
have to go and
replacement
calculate.
would reinforce the general fund, correct, largely? Or
Well,
where would
it
that
could.
money
It would
go?
it could be used to offset existing costs, or it could be used for other projects that are just things that we would say are normal city business. We had just over 20 million that technically could be spent in that category. I would have to go back and I can add that up and tell you how much
So is,
we have
okay,
left over.
is it, I guess my question is, if we wanted to, look, like everyone knows, I'm concerned that we're going through the excess reserves in the general fund extraordinarily quickly. And it would be good to know how much if we wanted to reallocate some of these funds for projects that are the most delayed here, and we are legitimately concerned, maybe some of it goes to water mains, for example. But if we have money that could otherwise be supporting the general fund and what's going through there, and it's a matter of just reallocating some of this 9 million into revenue replacement, I think we should understand what that possibility is and how much money it could be.
I think the challenge there too is, I mean, I don't think we have a great deal at risk of not getting expended properly and under, but under. I think it would be very difficult to go back to organizations to which we've made this commitment and tell them we're going to take it back. I don't know what we would have to do that.
Well, it's only if they're not going to be able to
Right, and as I said, I think we're going to get them done.
I think it's up to the city council, but I also think that we have very aggressively spent down our excess reserves. And if there is an ability to reinforce the general fund as we find a way to get it back in balance, I would certainly say of this 9, what would we feel, what should we consider doing?
Let me look at those numbers.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is maybe we'll have you come back in June. In 2 months, you'll have more clarity of what's going on, and we'll get some of these questions answered, because to put you on the spot today, there's a lot of complications, but they're all really good questions everyone had, and I'd like funnel them through me over the next few months, but if it's okay with you to come back.
Sure,
I had the
absolutely.
same concern Committeeman Livingston had, is that 9 million is blank on that spreadsheet, and we want to make sure. One last question, and then we have to move on to the
Yeah,
next.
this is related. And Sarah, maybe you can provide some clarification. So my understanding when reading the rules, the most recent rules, is that obligating funds by the end of the year is not, in fact, we've heard a lot about, gotta get those contracts signed. It's really our budget process, right? That we have to have a
No,
budget.
that's absolutely wrong. They
So
sent
where
out
is it-
new guidance.
The most recent one I read said through your legislative process, the locals. So
what were you
saw
reading?
signed from the Treasury Department,
What document was it?
the ARPA, the latest guidelines. But I'd like
I
to
will
see.
send
No,
you
I'm just
the
asking. So what are you saying it has to be then? Because I think
It has to be under a contractual agreement that they say is enforceable. And that is,
Okay.
if it's a capital project, something you're building something, that means signed contracts that have been procured, that have followed the procurement requirements, which also means you can't make up fake ones, like say, oh, we're going to get a time and activity thing on something, and that's good, right? Wrong.
Okay, great, thank you. No, I
Okay.
wasn't, my understanding was that it had to follow the municipality's budgeting process and be allocated. So I just didn't see that. If you could share that with me, that would be great.
And thank you. We have one last
Just
quick
one other
question. He said he'd be
Would
quick.
this fire truck qualify for ARPA funding?
Well, we could put it under replacement revenue. I believe we would have enough that hasn't been expended under replacement revenue for that amount.
So is that something maybe we can look into for the June meeting, because that would really be helpful. And we're going to keep an eye on this, and thank you for all these reports, because I didn't understand it before, and now that I can see, and I see where we're at risk, and knowledge is power, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to open the discussion for the Noyes Cultural Center. Laura?
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. We had a report done about modernizing the HVAC system at our Noyes Cultural Arts Center. So this building is a historic building that was designed by architect Daniel Burnham. It was constructed in 1892 as the third school that was constructed in the city of Evanston. It replaced 2 one-room schoolhouses. So it is a very prominent building in our history. It was operated as the Noyes Street School for quite some time. The city acquired it in 1980 for $1.1 million. Generally, this building is not used for city programming. It is primarily used as an incubator for artists, sculptors, theater companies. It is used very minimally. There's a summer camp program that runs out of there. There's an occasional children's program, and it is used for the Fleetwood Jourdain theater program. This building is one of our legacy facilities that we have been working on. So we have been working for all of these facilities to come up with some information to allow everybody to get their hands around what some of our financial problems are, challenges. I'll say challenges are. This is this would fall into these categories where we have these three: Police Fire Headquarters, Civic Center, and Noyes, where we've been developing plans, but we haven't yet come up with a concrete pathway forward, versus the Service Center, Animal Shelter, and Ecology Center, where we have developed plans and received direction from the City Council. Next slide. So when we looked at updating the HVAC system, there's actually quite a lot that goes with it because it's such a significant upgrade. And it involves also upgrading the electrical system for the building, that then it puts us into all sorts of situation with looking at code requirements. We also would use this opportunity to look at modernizing the building and trying to make it generally more energy efficient, aligning it with some of our CARP standards for LEDs and other lighting modernization, and then addressing things like ADA compliance, which was covered under a separate report. But every time we do a significant improvement at a building, we want to actually scoop up all those ADA issues as well. This building master plan is a little bit different in that it really did not address anything related to programming or the layout of the building. We're not looking at how we would do significant changes to change the operation of the building and to make it fit a different operational plan for the city. It's not looking at things like security, which we would look at for at this building or the Police Fire Headquarters. There would be some upgrade to the finishes and remodeling because we'll be cutting a lot of holes in the walls and ceiling to be able to do these kinds of improvements, and we would be fixing those things under this under these contracts, but it really isn't looking at doing a wholesale renovation. Next slide. No, there. So the building report looked primarily, first and foremost, at the HVAC and how to replace that, modernize it, and align it with the Climate Action Resilience Plan. So under that, they included kind of looking at if we just converted the existing systems to all electric, which they really did not price for us. There's heat pumps that were considered, variable refrigerant flow, dedicated outdoor air supply, and geothermal. Heat pumps are pretty low maintenance as HVAC systems go. Variable refrigerant flow systems are much more complex and require a lot more maintenance. This was really reinforced by our facility staff as well as our consultant, and so we really shied away from going with the variable refrigerant flow systems. When you deal with all electric systems for HVAC, those systems operate best, whether they're those systems operate best when temperatures are not extreme. So particularly in the Midwest, we're mostly concerned about the very cold days. So it becomes really complicated to have only one system that's all electric that's going to be able to provide adequate heat when it's 10 degrees outside. For that reason, it's really common to bundle and have at least two systems. So in this particular case, looking at a geothermal and a heat pump system combined is really helpful for operations. I will say the dedicated outdoor air supply is more about a code requirement that you must have forced air ventilation in order to get the circulation of air within the building. That building does not currently have that. Next slide. So when we look at all four options where they sort of bundled stuff together, the first two options really are cheaper to install because they are only one system, but because during cold weather they really do not operate that well, you end up spending a lot of energy operating during really cold weather, and so that actually makes them less green or less compliant with CARP, and they tend not to do as well. It's really a struggle to keep the building warm on certain extreme weather days. The lower two, the third and fourth option that were described, are those bundled systems. They are very much more what we would be looking for, in that they would keep the building temperate kind of under all weather conditions. All four options include air conditioning, which is currently not offered at Noyes except for a few spaces that have window air units. And all of them include the forced air ventilation, which is the DOAS, the DOAS system, which stands for Dedicated Outdoor Air Supply. Having evaluated all those and wanting to stay away from variable refrigerant flow, the staff and the consultant kind of work together to recommend this third option. We also believe that once we get into geothermal options, there will be the better energy profile, and the fact that we're using on-site renewable generation will trigger us into grants, which will lower the cost. Right now, grants for geothermal and renewable sources are a little bit in flux. There are funds that are authorized through the Infrastructure Reduction Act. There are some local agencies that had been supplying funds but have stopped for the moment and probably have stopped permanently. When we get to a decision, that is the time when we will really look at how to maximize the funding, outside funding that we get for it. But I believe that these latter two options are going to end up being very cost comparable to the first two options by the time we get through the grant funding sources. Next slide. This is just a list of recommended improvements. This was covered more thoroughly in the report, but in addition, I just want to point out that in addition to looking at just the HVAC system, we would also be looking at things like lighting modernization and providing better insulation. Next slide. We directed the consultant to provide a phased rollout because we knew that $22 million was a lot, but what they did, they basically indicated it is very challenging because you're providing a system for the entire building. So phase one, you're not actually operating any revised HVAC system. It's just a partial improvement. After phase two, it's only the basement. It's only the first floor after phase three. So basically, we would recommend that you would do phases 1 through 4 as one project. That project would probably take you approximately 5 years to get done. Next slide. So I've indicated that we would choose to do most of the work as one multi-year project. Next slide. We would start, the earliest we would start doing planning and design would be next year, construction taking place in years 26 and 27. Then we could look at following on solar. There's an advantage to putting solar in a future year out in the distance, and that is that solar technology is really still changing quite a lot. The options that are going to be available for solar technology and the relative efficiencies will probably be dramatically different in the 2030s than they are right now in 2024. So it's to our benefit to hold off on doing that for a few years. Next slide. So this project, this report was presented to the Parks and Rec Board. We've been discussing it with the Historic Preservation, although they're not really officially reviewing it. They have some members that are providing us with some feedback, and we'll be going forward to City Council on April 29th to discuss generally how they want us to proceed. But at this point, I mean, we certainly would be really interested in hearing feedback from the committee on anything that you have comments on, but especially funding.
Councilman Kelly?
Thank you. Since this is in the first ward, a lot of thoughts on this, but I love this. I think it looks like a great plan, although I would like us to only commit to, I mean, we can look at the long-range plan, but I think sometimes what's happened in our city is we've looked at these big plans and sort of basic essential upgrades get postponed as we wait to approve a much larger plan. So I would like to see us move forward with the HVAC and the electrical that is needed. I love getting geothermal in there. We, talked about the direct pay grants that are available that aren't even competitive. But it is a little bit, applying for them is a little tricky. And in this case, I might even recommend a consultant to help us apply for those. If we sink, I think it's 5% of tangible cost into it this year, we can get probably at least 40% covered, get it refunded from the Fed. So I would love to see us move forward this year and take action to move forward with the HVAC and the electrical, and not feel that we have to commit to, and as your point's well taken, that solar is changing, a lot is changing, but minimally commit to that. I know, I've been over there frequently, and I know it is really, the main issue over there is the HVAC. The other things, they said even electrical can wait, but I understand that those we would probably want to do at the same time. So that's what I would like to see us do. And I think there's been some, I just want to point out, I hear a lot of, reference, even among council members, to deferred maintenance, and even myself, sometimes I think we're talking about more about upgrades than maintenance, right? When we're
Yes.
talking about, so.
I will say that that grant for geothermal, I mean, I've looked into that. There's there's no opportunity for us to have this under contract. We'd have had to spend at least 5% of the cost by December 31st. And since we have not even decided a pathway, it would take us 4 to 5 months to hire a firm if we wanted to go design build. Otherwise, we'd only be in engineering at the end of the year. It really seems unlikely, but there are other opportunities. And that particular geothermal grant is through the Infrastructure Act. There is some motivation. So this becomes really political. There's a lot of pressure to extend the deadline beyond the end of the year. Congress would have to authorize that, and so it is unlikely to happen before the election. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. In addition, that energy grant is there are two types of grants, essentially, that are readily available. There's like clean energy grants, and then there's historic preservation tax credits, which are a little bit of a challenge to use, but there is a mechanism to use it, but you can't use both. So as we move forward, we would work with the consultant to do detailed pricing and analysis of the grant opportunities and select the option that works best for us from what is available at the time. But there are definitely opportunities out there. They will offset some of the cost, but not all of the cost.
Are you estimating about 30, 40%, or?
My guess is approximately 25% of the cost would be offset.
The direct pay would be 30 to 40, which you can stack, but yes, not with the historical credits, but you can stack those. And I would just ask, we do a lot of things really fast and spend a lot of money really fast, almost on a dime, it feels like sometimes, and I'm not saying this wouldn't be difficult, but for 5%, whether it's equipment and a contract, we're in April, I mean, because that's a grant that we automatically get. We apply for it, it's not competitive, there's no ceiling on it. If we apply for it, we meet the requirements, the fair wage and everything else in there, which we would get that reimbursement of at least 30 to 40% by sinking 5% into that. So we're April, and again, I've seen us take action on other items, expensive items, purchasing property with whole plans, like Little Beans and more. So I think we should at least really roll up our sleeves and see if we can get in, consider this on deadline. It would be so great to be assured of that reimbursement again, and that can get stacked with other grants, not the historical one, yes, I know that, so.
It would only be 5% on the geothermal, which is a relatively low cost of percent of the 22 million, though. So the geothermal is a portion of the HVAC system, which go further back, which is $8 million. So the geothermal, as I recall, is really like a couple $1 million of that cost. So I just want to be cognizant of the fact that it's not necessarily going to be our best pathway forward in terms of grants. Not that we wouldn't go after it if that were the option.
Okay, Councilman Newsman has a question.
You're muted, sir.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I'm ready to go if Councilmember Kelly's done.
Are you done, Councilman
Well
Kelly?
done, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, there's several questions here. I will not be comfortable moving this forward at the dollar amounts we're talking about until we have completed that look at all of our city's assets. And so we have the putting our assets to work study coming to us sometime soon. Can somebody speak to that?
I can speak to that. We have a draft. This is getting presented. This project and the putting assets to work project results, draft results are getting presented both at the April 29th City Council meeting.
Okay, because we have this building along with the Civic Center, the Police and Fire Headquarters. We have some pretty substantially expensive building projects all hitting at around the same time. And I think we need to be really careful about how we're spending money and what we're committing to. So I will continue to engage in this discussion, assuming that it will move forward, but I don't want that to be taken as a foregone conclusion. You mentioned the historical status of this building. Is there any, is it a landmark? Do we have to worry about architectural review of when we replace the windows?
Yes, it is a landmark. It is arguably one of the top landmarks in the city of Evanston because of its history. And that is why we sort of tried to engage the Historic Preservation Commission. They typically only review projects once there are design drawings and concrete plans. There were proposals about doing some solar energy, and there are some HVAC equipment that would be located on the outside of the building. And they have provided some feedback on how to minimize that. I was planning more to present that with City Council because they're still looking at it. But there are some things that are recommended in this report that don't really fit with our city code. Again, the solar stuff we would probably be looking at pretty far in the future, so it's not necessarily something we have to worry about in the next few years, and is probably a bigger issue for the community.
Don't fit with our city code in what respect? We're proposing stuff that is not compliant with our historical preservation code, or?
Yes, so the city code doesn't, for historic preservation, doesn't really have a way of installing things like a canopy over a parking lot to install solar panels. That's just not something that is really contemplated as allowable. But
How
that
about the windows themselves? Windows are often difficult to replace in historical context.
Right, and I will admit that I do not, they're still doing that review, so I don't have the most up-to-date information, but we will have that complete by council discussion.
Okay. And do you have any information or data in front of you about how much revenue this building brings in?
I do not. I actually had seen some projections, and I'm really reluctant to expound on those, but I believe it is fairly cost neutral or just brings in a modest amount of revenue, less than a couple $100,000, but that does not contemplate the capital improvement.
Cost neutral now.
Cost neutral without
the improvement.
Right. It brings in a modest amount of revenue, so it's not quite cost neutral, but it does not pay for this kind of capital.
There's no way it'll pay for a capital improvement.
Okay, Councilman, are you done? Okay. Councilman, just.
I have some more questions, but I think they're best that I provide these to Laura offline.
Okay. Councilman Livingston?
Not
Committee Member Livingston.
Citizen or whatever.
Member.
Committee member. In terms of funding, I think it might be helpful here to try to separate saving the programs from saving the building. And it sounds like, it's sort of a cost-neutral element relative to running the programs, but is this even the right place to have these programs? It seems to me that given the scope of what goes on there, again, separate yourself from the building. You could do this at a facility that would be far less expensive than what we're talking about on renovation. And I just want to get your thoughts on that, because I think it is two things. Would the city rather spend the money on a historic renovation project as opposed to affordable housing or something else, right? Why is this the number one priority? Where it's a separate issue about the programs. The programs might have a much more efficient solution in a better building even after it's renovated. So are you thinking about, sort of, we don't have to do the programs at this building, presumably. What other alternatives are there?
So that actually is more of a Parks and Recreation discussion, as I don't really deal with city programming, but I think that is a conversation that could definitely be had. And am happy to bring them along to come back and have that conversation, if that is what the committee desires.
Well, we could decide where that should be, but I think, it is a lot of money for what is going on in there. So let's separate the two
Right.
decisions.
And you mentioned are there a lot of Evanston programs going on in there?
There are a few. The most prominent is the Fleetwood Jourdain Theater Program. The city doesn't really have in its buildings a lot of auditoriums with a stage and everything that are really of professional grade. And there are 2 auditoriums in that building, one which is used by Piven Theater Company and one which is used by Fleetwood Theater Company, I believe.
Okay, Councilman Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, this is really a cherished center, and it's a beautiful center. It has also the Actors Gymnasium. It was a school, I went to school there. It's got beautiful grounds around it. The problem that I'm hearing is just like what we talked about, as you mentioned, 15 years ago, Robert Crown, there was talk about what to do, whether to renovate, until it fell apart so badly that it had to be, demolished and build a new one. And my concern is now, this should not be a big price tag. We need long-range planning, financial planning. The HVAC with some electrical needs to be replaced. This is a cherished building that it runs in the black. Every building will have costs. That's what a city does, is it maintains it. I'm sorry, I won't use the word maintain, but invest those upgrades that are essential to keep them. And this doesn't mean now we move out because it needs a new HVAC and electrical. I don't want to see these big, it's nice to think forward about potentially, solar panels and all, that's fine. But right now we just need to contemplate, not even contemplate, actually, I don't even really think that this should just be part of our line items. Every public facility that we have, I don't know, maybe Mr. Cholik can speak to how often HVACs need to be replaced, how often roofs need to be replaced. But this is just something that should go in. This shouldn't be brought to council about we have to replace the HVAC, but you have $30 million to stay in that building over so many years. I'm sorry, we expect our buildings to be upgraded effectively. Nobody ever said get rid of noise. We don't hear the residents clamoring to say get rid of Noyes Cultural Arts Center. It also services so many artists have studio space. They're local artists. It's a beautiful center for so many reasons. And, maybe Mr. Cholik, you could speak a little bit to that, but I do think we should know, like, how often do HVACs need to be replaced? How often do roofs? And we should have all that. So when we're in budget season, we can say, well, next year we have to replace a fire truck. Have some general idea, ballpark idea, as opposed to coming to council to say, oh, you want to replace the HVAC? Well, if you want to do that, you also got $30 million more ahead of you down the road. I mean, that to me does not feel like the way we should be addressing our public facilities, particularly our facilities that are cherished. Thank you.
Good evening, Sean Cholik, again, Manager of Facilities and Fleet Management. So to Councilmember Kelly's question, it all depends on what the system is, what type of system. Different roofing systems have a different useful life. Same thing with mechanical systems. We've got boilers here at the Civic Center that have lasted a really long time. So it's hard to pinpoint an exact number on them as a general useful life. And this is why this kind of study that was done is, by engineering is an important one, because it really helps us to identify exactly what's going on with each system and what the options are to upgrade. This is really something that should be done on all of our major facilities, and I think that, the city is trying to work towards that. So that's a tricky question to answer.
Okay.
There's no exact useful life on any one system. It depends on the type of system.
Right. So again, I think it's interesting, the study, and they did a nice job on it, but things will change from year to year. What we do know is that what is non-discretionary is the HVAC and electrical. That's what we need to replace. And it really does concern me when something that is needed, it's been needed, I think, for like 5 years, and I'm not sure why. Again, I think it hasn't been addressed because I'm not sure why why we haven't addressed
So
it.
I think it goes back to, the difference between deferred maintenance and deferred upgrades and replacements. The maintenance is being conducted on these facilities. That's not a question. That there's ongoing maintenance. We've got 16 tradesmen in-house that are constantly working hard to keep the buildings going. We acquire new buildings sometimes, we lose buildings, or we sell buildings, but we still continue to maintain all of them. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But, the upgrades and the replacements are something that, engineering's been working hard to make sure that we kind of get on a regular schedule. And I think that the problem is over the years, budget has been an issue. As, these projects have come up, questions have come up about what needs to be replaced. And, Laura's always putting together a long list of CIP items. Some things get prioritized to the top, some things get pushed back. And I think over the years, just the amount of facilities we have has just accumulated, and we keep pushing back all of these capital upgrades.
And that's one of
replacements.
our goals as a committee. I
Right.
think we want, and
But let me just finish. So
and then
thank you.
Councilman Nguyen has a
Right, so
comment.
thank you, but I do think, with all due respect, we bought Little Beans, and I believe you're all invested now working over their facilities. No one said, we weren't given the option to vote on HVAC. No one came to us 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and said, okay, Noyes Cultural Arts Center needs a new HVAC system. We recommend you put this in the budget. That didn't even come to us, yet we bought a new Little Beans. We're building a very, very expensive animal shelter. But yet the HVAC for a center that's beloved, that's historical, that's highly used, and that runs in the black, we weren't given that to vote on. So it's not that we decided we didn't want to spend money on that, just to be clear. So what building is our next HVAC do we need? I mean, just out of curiosity. So, well, you don't have to answer that now.
We're going
I
to
don't wanna
stay
ask
on
you
this
that.
point, and Councilman Nguyen, you
Claire, Councilmember Kelly, I understand your concern about this, but I think what you're describing doing is what we have done over and over and over again to this building and to so many of our other buildings piecemeal. I've toured Noyes a number of times. I remember walking around the exterior of it in the snow because the chimneys were about to fail. Yes, both of you all are both nodding. And so we fixed those, but we have so many of these facilities that need significant renovation. They not just maintenance, and we have deferred it, and we've taken the shortcut over and over again. Let's just do this, not the whole amount. And we end up with a $22 million bill. And I think Committee Member Livingston raises an excellent question in terms of, is there a better place for this programming? And so that we don't have a $22 million historic preservation project on our hands. I think all of those programs are wonderful there, but clearly the building isn't paying for itself, and we're looking at $22 million, and so I'm going to be looking hard at these things, but looking for a shortcut I won't support that. I mean, we have shortcutted our way into $100 million worth of need.
Okay, this is going to be brought up at council. I think we've given you some feedback. One last comment from Councilman Kelly.
I'm sorry, but the $22 million also includes things like solar panels, over the parking lot. I mean, what we're talking about, what we need there, and I go over there all the time. What's needed is HVAC and electrical. Folks love it there. That's what's needed right now, is HVAC and electrical, and that has been put off. Why has that been put off? Why did we purchase a new building where our facilities now has to hustle over there, but we didn't in fact even bring it to council to replace the HVAC? So that's the issue at hand here. This is a perfectly solid building.
Councilman Reed has his hand up, and then you guys, I know you're going to be debating it at council.
Thank you. I just want to, on balance, so kind of the leaning of the committee is maybe better understood, so that I also appreciate Committee Member Livingston's comments and as well as Councilmember Nguyen and agree fairly strongly with it. I do think it's worth exploring whether or not these programs can be conducted in other spaces that are more cost effective and truly, holistically within the black when you factor in capital improvements as well for the spaces. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your feedback. I think this will be a robust discussion at council. Things like what kind of grants we can get, who's actually using the facility, are there alternatives, and I know you'll have your homework to come back, so thank you.
I do, and I will work with the Parks and Rec Board, I'm not the board, the Parks and Rec Department to make sure that information is available.
And maybe they should come to the meeting too, so. As long as you're up, we're going to go right to something we've been working on for a while. I'd like to open the discussion regarding a policy for unbudgeted capital projects and cost overruns. Before we begin, thank you for your memo and everything. There's going to be emergencies. We understand that. What we really want to do as a group is come up with a dollar amount so that we can actually have a policy. And it's for things like Little Beans, the animal shelter, things that weren't budgeted that are coming up. So two different dollar amounts that have come to me has been $250 and $500, which would mean that if anything is over, I'll use the example $500, it would come to us for some feedback before going to the council. And $500,000, not $500, 500,000. And the other is 250,000. So I'd like to get some feedback from our committee, what you're thinking, what would be a good dollar amount that would need to come to us before. And we're hoping that these aren't emergency. These things, if we're well thought out and we have a plan and we know we're going to need something, there should be a month or two that can come to us. I know there's extenuating circumstances, but at least if we have a policy, we can move forward. So any feedback from the committee here on the dollar amount? Councilman Kelly.
Yeah, I would lean towards 250. Still, that's a lot. That's $250,000 exceeding budget. So, and I would just say, any expenditure, I'm excluding emergencies measures, but any expenditure of $250,000 over budget for unbudgeted expense, that should come to us to vet and to make a recommendation to council.
Committee, I think Committee Livingston, and then Committee McMillan's next.
We'll see, once you go ahead, I've said a few.
Oh, Committee McMillan?
I think 250 is a good number too.
Regardless of 250 or 500, I think what kills us on the capital side is what Councilmember Kelly just said. It's the piecemeal nature of how capital gets developed for the plan. Because every project individually probably sounds like a good idea and it can get support. But ultimately, we have about $10 million a year of debt that rolls off from prior CIP programs. That gives you your baseline of what you can spend, roughly, without adding incremental property taxes. 10 million is not a lot of money. We are in a, if there's not a desire to let debt grow substantially, or whatever, that's part of one of our goals, is how are we going to forecast debt, then actually without impacting property taxes, we only have about $10 million worth of capital a year. And so if a Little Beans comes up of 2.6 million, that is all incremental to a future debt issuance and higher taxes. And people just need to understand that, I think, more clearly, that you can't look at this project by project. You have to look at it as what level of taxes are we comfortable with? And if that's the case, we have to make sure that we really prioritize that capital plan and stick to it. There are always going to be some overruns, especially in this environment. There's always going to be some emergency. You can build that into the budget too. So I think, I would say 500 is probably enough to not, to bring only the most critical items to us. It should be, fairly rare. But 250 or 500, but the important thing is we need a capital budget that means something that people do not incrementally add to when the next good idea comes up. That someone says, oh, we'll help you at the skate park. It's going to cost you half of that or whatever. That can't be how we do budgeting. It's got to be, these are the priorities. This is all we have to spend. This is what we're willing to let debt and taxes go up by to fund this capital project. And be strategic about where we spend capital, not reactive to Little Beans is for sale and it's available. So, anyway.
Councilman Reed?
Thank you. I just want to, I appreciate this policy. There are a few things that I think that need to be outside of the bounds of this policy, or really, I think we need to hone in this policy a bit more. I think one way to kind of hone in is, are we talking about expenditures over $500,000 or $250,000 or whatever the case may be, that are from the general fund or from, excess reserves? Is that what we're talking about? Because I do think that expenditures from TIF districts that are obviously spent within the TIF district do not have, the global impact of potentially raising property taxes or shifting the burden outside of that TIF district. If we're talking about the acquisition of affordable housing, whether it be units or whatever the case may be, I think that again, that is something that we know is such a critical issue that I don't think it needs to be slow. And there are opportunities that pop up that do require us to take swift action because we're competing with the private market. And so I think those opportunities should not be slowed down by this process. I do agree that there are other instances where it fully makes sense for it to come to this committee. And so I don't know if I'm going to make a motion now or if we're coming back with a full policy at some point. And so actually I'll ask the chair to advise on that.
Yeah, I think our goal today is to come up with a dollar amount and then work with Laura and her team to come up with a full policy. But of course, it's going to exclude emergencies or things like you just mentioned that need to be acted on immediately. But I think there's a lot of things that don't need to be acted on immediately that can come to us for our inputs. So,
I
Committee
don't
Member
think that's
McMillan.
what Devon's saying. I think he's saying he wants the TIF monies left out, which I would strongly disagree with. I mean, if we're going to have budgetary discipline, we need to have it in all facets. So, and if it requires us having extra meetings, I think a lot of us would be more than willing on an emergency basis to come in and talk about these things. But, we have yet to get our spending under control. I'm confident we have an amended budget coming up just because of the way we behaved ever since we approved the budget, and it's just going to happen. So, as you know,
Okay,
I strongly.
If I can.
No, Devon, I'm still talking.
I was just I was speaking. I was just asking clarification from the chair, and then you jumped in afterwards. I didn't get an
No, I
opportunity to
had my
finish.
hand up, I had my light on, and I'm still talking.
I need to understand the TIF better. Mine was more capital projects and unbudgeted items, but I would have to get a better handle on the TIF situation that Councilman Reed mentioned.
That's fine.
One thing I wanted to.
Chair, am I able
I'm
to?
sorry.
Yes, Councilman
Am I able
Reed?
to finish, Chair? I was just seeking clarification from the chair because if I'm able to finish here.
Sure.
Because I just asked for clarification from you, and that's when things.
Can you give me an example of something that wouldn't have time to come to us that would be unbudgeted? Is there an example?
I think that, there could be, for example, there was a property in the 5th Ward that the city purchase. I can't say for sure that this wouldn't have been an opportunity, but again, when we're competing with the private market for properties that are for sale that we could put into a land trust or have for development, I do think that there's possibility for those projects to have to be on an accelerated basis. And I also think that we shouldn't. We know that affordable housing is a priority of the city, and certainly we have to have a plan and be strategic, but it's such a priority that if the council chooses to move forward with the acquisition of land or whatever the case may be for affordable housing, I think we need to have the flexibility to do that without it getting bogged down here in the Finance and Budget Committee.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we're running a little short on time. What I'd like to do tonight is come up with a dollar amount, and there's going to be times that we just can't meet, or we'll have a special meeting. But I think what we're really talking about is some of these big items that have gotten into the budget without full discussion, without really looking into them. And we really, moving forward, want to get a better handle on all this, because as I said at the very beginning, we can have anything we want, not everything, and everyone wants everything, but everything means more taxes, more bonds. So I think 250 probably would work, because if it's, Laura, what do you think? Is there going to be a lot coming to us over 250, or do you think 500? We really want it for the bigger items.
500 would be easier for the staff to manage in terms of reporting out. That 250 would capture more and and more things that are
Unbudgeted, though? I mean, how many times are there things that are really unbudgeted over 250,000?
I think some of that depends on some of the property acquisitions that Councilmember Reed was referring
But
to. and some
again, with
other
the policy, we might have to exclude some of those because of confidentiality.
I mean, why don't we
and
set it
negotiation.
at 250, and if it doesn't work, we can come back and look at it again?
Okay.
Would you be comfortable with that?
Let me do some analysis and take a look at it. But
No, I think we
we'll
wanna
definitely
move it
return
tonight.
with a draft policy.
Okay, and Councilman Reed and Councilman McMillan, you both seem to have some ideas. Could they work with you in the interim
Yeah.
to kind of?
I don't want to see the TIF excluded.
Well, we're going to debate that, so I think next meeting, let's use 250, and then you'll do some analysis and tell us how many times it would have had to come to us for unbudgeted items, and then put what you think should be in the policy, and we can always exclude things from the policy. But we'd like to get your opinion, and I'd like to turn it over to you.
I just want to mention too, really quick, in the memo, it does talk about how staff does work to cover some of the smaller six-digit overruns, or more of the overruns on the capital side. If we have one project that comes under by $250,000, we can use the $250,000 that we save to cover the overage on another project. So that's possible within $250,000, and I think Laura has talked about maybe providing a report of those types of instances where this one was 250. So maybe there's some, like, hey, if it's 250, we can provide a report that shows we took money from this project to cover the overage. If it's 500,000, maybe that's the threshold.
Let's just give it a try. I mean, if it's tripping us up.
For the committee to consider, I just want to throw that out there as another idea that we can incorporate in the policy.
I would put that in the policy, but Councilman,
Kelly, I have to respond. I mean, it's about transparency. And just because you have extra funds in excess reserves and you switch it and you transfer it, when we pay, this is about budgetary discipline, ultimately. This is what we're looking for. It'd be lovely to have a year where we didn't amend our budget. And also we have to keep in mind, we are a public institution, a public body. We can allocate funds to Councilmember Reed's concern to purchase, say we want to purchase affordable housing in the upcoming year we want to allocate $3 million for that, and something comes up. We can discuss that, and we have to discuss that publicly, the same way we have to discuss if we think it's important to consider leasing a building for this civic center. That should be discussed first publicly. Now, when you go in and you start negotiating the price, the square foot price, or the price of a house, that's private. But all of these discussions need to happen publicly, and it seems that that's getting lost here with this city council, and it concerns me greatly. We can allocate funds during budget season for affordable housing, and we can decide what a maximum amount is that we want to allocate in the upcoming year. What we can't do is secretly go around, deciding we're going to lease buildings, we're going to go out shopping for leases and shopping for houses without a public discussion.
Okay, I think we've gotten the feedback from the committee. We will start with 250, but I would appreciate your analysis if the 250 or 500 is better. Also, at the legal, what can be brought to us that has to be private, and we can always go in closed session, I'm assuming, our committee. Put what if you could take some of the input from us, put what you want in the policy, and we will point by point approve it as a committee.
On the question of going into closed session, you can, as long as it meets the requirements set out in the Open Meetings Act. So it has to be one of those items in that act. But you
and
can.
if you can define that maybe in the policy so that there's no ambiguity on that. Any other comments? Councilman Kelly.
On a different note, are we wrapped up on that?
We were going to go over the financials, but do we have time to do that, or is there another committee? Okay, I'd like to open it up for the discussion. This is going to be ongoing, so maybe you can kind of go through the 2023 preliminary year-end financials. Because I know that was asked by some of the committee members.
We fully intended on bringing a bit more of a, to be fully transparent, the budget amendment was included in the draft agenda that went out last week. Our accounting staff makes many adjustments at the end of the fiscal year. On Friday and last week, they were still continuing to make those adjustments. They're nearly finished, but they weren't finished last Friday whenever we needed to get this packet out. So we've deferred that budget amendment to May, but we'll be prepared to speak further to that then. So for now, we've provided year-end cash fund balances, revenues, and expenses for all of our funds. Again, it's preliminary and subject to the audit process and close out. But we're nearing completion with those adjustments and should be prepared to speak further in May.
And the general fund is coming in to what we expected.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, we've been lucky. We budgeted a $10 million deficit. We're looking at an $8.7 million deficit. So we did better than budgeted. Expenses did run over for many of the things that we talked about every month with this committee. It's the wage increases, it's the capital projects, it's the transfer to fleet and insurance. Those are the three things that caused expenses to go over budget as we expected, and revenues came in over as well, so we ended up with a smaller operating loss than what we budgeted.
Great, great. And thank you for all your patience with me this last week going through everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same with your entire staff. Councilman Kelly, do you have?
Thank you, Clayton. So we'll have at the May meeting, the amendment that you're proposing will come to us?
That's correct.
For approval? Okay, for recommendation. Okay, and then I just wanted to dovetail a little bit on what Mr. Mortel, the president of the Fire Pension Board, mentioned. I do think, we did vote on our pension policy, which is wonderful, and I think we're all very pleased with this, and the community's pleased. We did also indicate one of the points was to allocate 100% of our PPRT funding, or what is allowable, which is 100%. So I just, for the sake of transparency and just clarity, this isn't any expenditures, but I'd like to recommend that we direct staff to create an account for our PPRT, and Shari, you're on the board, just so that we have a clear accounting of that, since over the years it's been, used for a variety of purposes, and I'm not criticizing that, but I think to get some clarity on that, since we now have, very explicitly indicated that we would be allocating 100%, so we can see what the running tab is. Would you agree?
Yeah, and we are at the next meeting. Mr. Mortel is going to come. I have talked to staff. I know you're talking to legal. We are going to get a clear recommendation on exactly the allocation to PPRT.
But this is much simpler, what I'm asking. I assume you would agree that they create it's not that hard to create an account for all the PPRT funds to go into that. Would you agree,
We have
Shari?
a separate account, but are we saying a different fund? So we'd add a 41st fund.
So is there a PPRT account only?
Yeah.
There is?
Yeah. In the general fund, we have an account that we use to track PPRT. We previously used two accounts, pension PPRT and
Right.
PPRT. And
So now there's
we
one?
just diverted all to PPRT. So we have an account in the general fund and a transfer of that PPRT to the pension funds.
So it's explicitly, and it remains in there, because we want to make sure the PPRT money that comes in there stays in there, so we have a running balance, and it's not being transferred and moved out at this point since the passage of our pension policy. And Mr. Martell, feel free to jump in.
Oh,
I don't know if
Committee Member Livingston wanted to
So
say
if I could just bring up something, because I think there's some confusion on this. The pension contributions are exactly what the pension policy said they should be. They're the actuarially determined amounts to get us to full funding by 2040. That will always be funded by a variety of sources that add up to that actuarially determined amount. Every line item on there will vary. The general fund is the swing, up or down, to make sure that we end up between police and fire contributing, what was it, $28.5 million or something on that line. So I don't want anyone to have the impression that we're shorting the pension funds contribution that they should be getting. It's always a variety of sources that have to add to the entire contribution, and the general fund is the net swing at the end. So we'll go through it more in May, but in no way is the pension fund, as far as I am aware, been shorted anything it should be to get it to that goal of full funding by 2040. And PPRT is very volatile.
But that is part of our pension policy, and there's a good reason for that. And I've spoken now with rating agencies, and every single one has said it is highly considered and considered very positive with rating to commit 100% of a revenue stream to our pensions. This is reviewed, this is looked on very positively by rating agencies. This means that we won't be making, it reduces the chances of making a political football out of our pensions by saying we might have to raise taxes, because at least we know that that entire revenue stream, whether, and I know it fluctuates from year to year and it's going down this year, but to commit that. So that is important. And and we did say that is our policy.
It is to ultimately determine what the trigger is that would raise property taxes. That's why it's in there. And we can go through it more in May. But PPRT is a relatively small piece of the overall pension contribution.
But it's a piece that we don't want to see the shell game with again. So it's just very important. Right. So that's all.
So we'll go through it more.
But I just want to make sure you're clear. I understand we're funding, and I'm very pleased with that. I'm not suggesting we're underfunding the pensions, but I am saying that it's very important that we do, as stated in our policy, that we do ensure that 100% of that's all going into, and I'm glad we have one account, and I ask that please don't transfer any of that out unless it's to the pensions. Mr. Mortel? Sorry, but he's here as we do liaison with the pension board, so I'd like to hear from him.
we're good. What?
Thank you for coming.
Mr. Mortel, thank you.
The money we're looking at is not for, it was earned in '23. It should go to the pensions. It'll go to '24 to ensure that we don't have to raise tax rates. And boy, what if we have enough PPRT that we can lower the levy? I don't hear that up here. I'm a taxpayer.
That is impossible at the
Well, you know what, we're going to have a full discussion in May, a full discussion we're going to have.
But also, I heard that you have your lawyers look at it. Do I need to bring my lawyers in? I heard your lawyers are going to look at this. I'm asking the committee, do you want my lawyers here? Because I have lawyers.
I think our policy is very clear, and I don't know why we should even be debating this, or just simply, we're dedicating 100%. Please keep it in that account and don't transfer it anywhere else.
Clayton.
Thank you.
We don't have our CFO here. He runs point on our pensions and is far more versed in the conversation than me. I would suggest we table the discussion until May.
Yes. But Mr. Martell, you're going to have your presentation in May. We're going to have the reconciliation of the PPRT in May. We're going to go through the pension policy in May. We're going to get opinions.
But if there's an opinion from the city's lawyer, quite honestly, I want an opinion from my lawyer. That's apples to apples. I don't want to get overrun by the lawyer overrules this. Certainly the city's going to be looking at this one way. My lawyer's going to be looking at it another way. So I want both.
I would think our city lawyer would be independent, but this is something we can discuss on the pension board. I think we are ready to adjourn.